A simple woman, Linda Thompson, steps into a luxurious Chicago car dealership, hoping to just browse. Dressed modestly, she's met with cold stares and subtle ridicule from staff. Humiliated but unshaken, she leaves quietly, unaware that her billionaire husband, Robert Thompson, is about to turn the tables and teach them a lesson they'll never forget. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Linda Thompson stepped out of her modest sedan and onto the polished sidewalk of the downtown Chicago car dealership, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had always admired luxury cars, not because she could afford them herself, but because she appreciated craftsmanship and beauty. Today, she had decided to treat herself to a small indulgence, exploring the latest models, maybe even taking one for a test drive. She adjusted her simple cardigan and smoothed her skirt, trying to blend into the environment. But the sharp contrast between her plain attire and the dealership's opulent setting immediately caught attention. The receptionist barely glanced up as Linda approached the sleek glass desk. "Can I help you?" the young woman asked, her tone polite but distant. Linda smiled nervously. "I'm just looking, maybe test driving a car. I'm interested in the sedan. Models." The receptionist's eyes flicked over her outfit, her plain flats and her hesitant demeanor. "I'll see if someone can assist you," she muttered, tapping on the keyboard without looking back. Linda felt a twinge of embarrassment, but tried to maintain her composure. She had encountered dismissive attitudes before, but she didn't expect it in a place that sold cars worth six figures. After a few minutes, a tall, sharply dressed salesman appeared, his expensive suit perfectly tailored, and his smile polished but cold. "I'm Mark," he said, extending a hand. Linda shook it, noting the contrast between his confidence and her own modest posture. "I'm just here to look around," she said politely. Mark raised an eyebrow and glanced at her outfit. "You know, our cars are, well, quite exclusive. Usually our clients prefer appointments." Linda swallowed, trying not to let the sting of condescension show. "I understand," she said. "I'd still like to see a few models if that's possible." Mark hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. "We have some beautiful sedans, but I must warn you, the prices might be challenging," he said, giving her a skeptical look. Linda forced a smile. "I know. I just want to see what's available." He sighed and led her through the showroom, where gleaming vehicles reflected the sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Each car was immaculate, polished to perfection, and clearly built for wealthier clientele. Linda's heart raced. She had never been this close to such luxury, and despite the cold reception, she felt a thrill she hadn't expected. As they walked, Mark made subtle comments that only deepened Linda's embarrassment. "These cars aren't really for everyone," he said casually, as though she were invisible in his world. Linda kept her head high, refusing to show how uncomfortable she felt. She glanced at the price tags, trying not to let the staggering numbers intimidate her. $120,000, $150,000, $200,000. She knew she wasn't here to buy, at least not today, but she wanted to learn, to understand the allure of these machines, the power they represented. Mark seemed impatient, as if her mere presence were an inconvenience. Finally, they reached a striking black sedan that seemed to exude elegance in every curve. Linda walked around it slowly, running her fingers lightly along the polished surface. "It's beautiful," she whispered, more to herself than to Mark. He scoffed lightly. "Yes, but you'd need a substantial bank account to even consider it," he said, folding his arms. Linda took a deep breath. "I'm not here to buy. I just like to see these cars, learn about them." Her voice was calm, yet firm. Mark's eyes narrowed, clearly unaccustomed to a client who spoke with quiet confidence despite her plain appearance. Linda tried to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping over her as Mark led her to the next model. Other staff and even a few customers gave her curious glances, some even whispering behind their hands. She could feel their judgment, their disbelief that someone like her could even be in this elite space. Her cheeks warmed with embarrassment, but she refused to retreat. She reminded herself that confidence wasn't about wealth or attire, it was about owning her presence. Still, the sting of exclusion was hard to ignore. After about 10 minutes, Mark's patience clearly ran out. "Look, ma'am, I don't think this is the right place for you," he said, sharply. "Maybe you should come back when you're more serious about buying." Linda froze, shocked by the blunt dismissal. She had expected polite indifference, maybe subtle condescension, but this felt like an outright insult. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm just looking. I didn't realize that was a problem." Mark shook his head. "We have enough clients who actually have money. Maybe another time." Linda felt a mixture of anger, humiliation, and disbelief. She had entered that dealership with excitement, curious and eager to experience something beautiful, and she was being cast aside simply because she didn't fit their expected mold. She took a deep breath and nodded politely. "Thank you for your time," she said, holding back tears of frustration. She turned and walked toward the exit, her hands gripping her bag tightly. Each step away from the dealership felt heavy, but also like a spark was igniting inside her, an awareness that appearances and assumptions could never define her worth. Outside, the air felt cooler and freer. Linda paused, taking a moment to breathe. She thought of her husband, Robert, and their life together. Despite living modestly, she knew her world was far different than the assumptions made by the dealership staff. Her husband's wealth was private, and she had never flaunted it, preferring to live simply. But the sting of rejection fueled a quiet determination. One day, she told herself, she would show them that first. Impressions were often wrong, and that humility and kindness carried more weight than arrogance ever could. The next morning, Linda woke with a quiet excitement. She had told herself that she would not dwell on yesterday's humiliation, but a spark of determination lingered. Robert, her husband, noticed her contemplative mood over breakfast. "Everything okay?" he asked, pouring his coffee. Linda smiled, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Yes, just thinking about yesterday. That dealership was rude." Robert chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Well, maybe it's time they got a proper introduction to us." Linda raised an eyebrow, curious, while Robert's subtle grin hinted that a surprise was already in motion. She wondered what he had in mind. By late afternoon, the streets of downtown Chicago buzzed with normal traffic. Unaware of the extraordinary event about to unfold, the dealership had opened its doors for another busy day, staff preoccupied with routine check-ins and routine sales calls. Mark, the same salesman who had dismissed Linda the day before, was organizing paperwork behind the sleek reception desk. "I hope nothing dramatic happens today," he muttered, unaware that fate had its own plans. Outside, a convoy of sleek vehicles approached, their engines humming with understated power. A glossy black Rolls Royce Phantom glimmered in the sunlight, drawing attention from pedestrians and drivers alike. As the Rolls Royce rolled up to the dealership entrance, a hush fell over the showroom. The door swung open and Linda stepped out with effortless grace, dressed in a tasteful, understated outfit that exuded quiet elegance. The staff froze, caught between disbelief and awe. Cameras from nearby onlookers flashed, instinctively capturing the surreal moment. Mark's jaw dropped. He recognized her instantly, but struggled to process the incongruity. This was the same woman he had dismissed rudely just a day ago. Linda's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the collective chaos she had sparked. She paused to adjust her gloves, giving the impression that she belonged exactly where she stood. Linda walked through the automatic doors, her heels clicking lightly against the polished marble floor. Mark and other staff scrambled, offering hasty greetings and blustered apologies. "Ma'am, Welcome back," Mark stammered. Linda smiled, her eyes steady, radiating an air of quiet authority. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm here today to explore some options for my personal collection." The words were simple, but carried the weight of unexpected revelation. Staff glanced at one another, finally recognizing that appearances had deceived them. The same woman they had mocked was now a client whose presence demanded respect. Robert, who had stayed inside the car, emerged from the driver's seat to join Linda. His tall, imposing figure and effortless charisma added to the surreal spectacle. He greeted the staff politely but firmly, his subtle authority unmistakable. Cameras outside and inside the dealership captured the reunion of husband and wife, the Rolls Royce gleaming like a jewel in the background. Linda introduced him briefly, though the names carried immediate weight. Robert's wealth and reputation in real estate and philanthropy were well known to insiders. Suddenly, the power dynamics of the showroom had shifted completely, and staff struggled to conceal their embarrassment. Linda moved gracefully toward the display of high-end sedans, pausing to examine the sleek curves and luxurious interiors. Mark hovered awkwardly, unsure whether to offer assistance or step back entirely. Linda's composed confidence made it clear she would decide on her own terms. She touched the leather seats with a reverent hand and examined the glossy dashboards, her curiosity genuine yet commanding. Staff members whispered among themselves, noting how differently they treated her now compared to yesterday. Every glance and gesture of condescension from before had vanished, replaced with politeness, careful attentiveness, and in some cases awe. As she continued her exploration, Linda spoke quietly to Robert about the models she liked. He listened with interest, sharing insights and occasionally teasing her lightly about her newfound boldness. Their interaction, calm and private yet undeniably influential, captivated the dealership staff. The hum of conversation shifted as word spread quickly among the employees. The billionaire husband and his elegantly poised wife were now present, and their Rolls Royce was a symbol of the life they had underestimated. Cameras captured every angle, and by now nearby pedestrians had stopped to observe the extraordinary scene unfolding in the heart of the city. By the time Linda decided to leave, the dealership had transformed. Staff had regained their composure, but the lesson was clear. The woman they had dismissed so casually was not only a serious client, but part of a powerful family whose influence extended far beyond luxury vehicles. Linda returned to the Rolls Royce, the door opening automatically at her touch. She slid into the car with elegance, smiling at the staff one last time. As the Phantom rolled away, cameras followed, flashing images that would circulate online, cementing the story as a viral sensation about humility, poise, and the unpredictable power of appearances. The news of Linda Thompson's Rolls-Royce arrival spread like wildfire. By the time she and Robert had driven away, social media was buzzing with images and videos from onlookers. Hashtags like "should lesson in humility" and "deal." Billionaire wife went viral, and local news outlets picked up the story. Linda, sitting beside Robert as the Phantom glided smoothly through downtown Chicago, smiled quietly. She didn't crave the attention, but she understood the lesson it delivered. The world had witnessed the contrast between yesterday's dismissal and today's awe. She thought about the staff at the dealership, hoping they had learned that judgment based on appearances could be costly. Back at the dealership, Mark and his colleagues were still reeling. The staff huddled together, replaying every interaction with Linda from the previous day. Faces flushed with embarrassment, they realized their assumptions had been painfully wrong. The arrogance they had shown was now a source of internal shame. Whispers of apologies and reflections spread through the office. Managers discussed retraining staff on customer relations, emphasizing respect and courtesy. It became clear that one careless assumption could harm the dealership's reputation, especially when social media could immortalize any lapse in professionalism. Linda's quiet power had made a lasting impact. Linda returned home later that evening, Robert driving beside her. She reflected on the surreal events of the day. It had been more than a personal triumph. It was a statement about confidence, dignity, and the value of respect. She realized that appearances were deceiving and that humility often spoke louder than wealth. For Linda, the Rolls Royce wasn't a symbol of vanity. It was a reminder that she and her husband had cultivated a life of quiet success, generosity, and grace. That day, she had turned a humiliating encounter into a powerful lesson for others without raising her voice or seeking revenge. Over the next few days, Linda noticed the social media attention growing exponentially. Clips of her calm, confident stroll through the dealership were shared by thousands, while commentators praised her elegance and self-possession. Local talk shows invited her for interviews, not for drama, but to discuss the lesson of humility and poise. Linda remained composed, speaking thoughtfully about dignity and the dangers of assumptions. She emphasized that wealth or status were irrelevant to human decency. Fans and followers admired her perspective, and the story became a nationwide anecdote about the consequences of underestimating someone based on outward appearances. Meanwhile, at the dealership, the impact of Linda's visit lingered. Management implemented stricter protocols for staff. Training, focusing on empathy, respect, and inclusivity. Employees were encouraged to see beyond first impressions and treat every visitor with courtesy. Mark, in particular, spent hours reflecting on his own behavior, realizing how damaging a single thoughtless comment could be. The story of Linda Thompson became a case study in professionalism, cited in meetings and corporate training sessions. The staff learned that humility, not arrogance, earned respect, and that anyone could wield influence in subtle but unforgettable ways. Linda and Robert enjoyed a quiet evening at home, reflecting on the whirlwind of events. Robert smiled at his wife, proud of how gracefully she had handled everything. "You really made your point," he said softly, taking her hand. Linda laughed lightly. "I didn't need to say much," she replied. Sometimes actions speak louder than words. The couple enjoyed dinner together, savoring the calm after the storm of public attention. Though the dealership incident had seemed insignificant at first, it had turned into a memorable lesson, not only for those who had judged her, but for anyone watching from afar. As weeks passed, Linda noticed subtle changes in her community. The story had inspired conversations about kindness, respect, and humility. People shared experiences of underestimation and how they had overcome similar situations. The lesson extended far beyond the luxury car dealership in Chicago. Linda felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that something as simple as grace and dignity could ripple outward, influencing countless others. Her encounter had become a beacon of empowerment, a reminder that composure in the face of arrogance could inspire admiration, change perceptions, and create meaningful social impact. In the end, Linda's life returned to its familiar rhythm, but the memory of the dealership incident remained vivid. She continued to live simply, focusing on family, charity, and personal growth, while occasionally recalling the stunned faces of the staff who had dismissed her. The Rolls Royce became a symbol not of excess, but of subtle triumph, proof that judgment based on appearances was flawed. Linda understood that true influence was not flaunted but carried quietly, with grace and confidence. And for anyone who had doubted her, the lesson had been unforgettable, a reminder that dignity, poise, and patience always prevail.